So how do you actually measure freedom? I mean, I don't mean in that big philosophical sense. I mean, if you had to put a number on it, a hard metric, how would you do it?
Right.
Is it just about the laws that are written down somewhere? Or is it something more intangible, the vibe in a country?
That's pretty much the central question of political science, isn't it? Because you can have the most beautiful constitution, perfect protections written down, but if the atmosphere on the ground is toxic, if journalists are afraid of being sued or people are looking over their shoulder before they post something online, do those laws really matter?
Exactly. There's this huge gap between what's on paper and what's actually practiced. And that tension, that gap, is exactly where we're going for today's deep dive.
Yeah.
We are zooming in on a really specific, high-stakes situation unfolding right now in Macedonia, or, well, North Macedonia officially.
It's a fascinating case study. It just perfectly illustrates that tension between the written rule and the lived reality. And we've got a whole stack of sources today that paint a really complex picture.
What are we working with?
We have a very sharp statement made just recently, January 29, 2026, by Minister Stefan Endonovsky. And we also have the full data breakdown from the 2025 Reporters Without Borders World Press Freedom Index.
And before you, the listener, tune out thinking, okay, this sounds like some inside baseball politics from the Balkans. Why should I care? Just hold on.
Right.
Because the stakes here are actually massive. We're not just talking about politicians arguing, we're talking about the actual mechanisms that decide if a country gets to join the European Union.
It's huge. This isn't just local gossip. This ties directly into what's known as Chapter 23 of the EU accession process. It is the hurdle that pretty much decides a country's future.
So here's the setup for today. We have a government minister claiming that media outlets are under a concerted attack. We have international watchdogs dropping new rankings that show a slide in freedom. And yet, and this is the part that really surprised me, we have a country that's somehow outperforming its EU neighbors while it's simultaneously sliding backwards. It's a complete paradox. So let's unpack it. What kicked this all off?
The catalyst was a very specific and pretty urgent warning from Minister Endonovsky. He came out addressing the state of media freedom, and he really didn't mince words. He claims there's a concerted, organized effort to intimidate specific media outlets in Macedonia.
And he wasn't speaking in vague terms, just soften what you get.
No, he named names, which is always a sign things are getting serious. When they list companies, it's personal.
He did. He specifically pointed to outlets like Republika, Plusinfo, and Alpha TV.
Okay, let's pause on the accusation itself. I mean, politicians complain about the media all the time, right? It's practically part of the job description. What makes this different? Why is this intimidation and not just a politician venting? That is the crucial distinction here. The minister is drawing a really hard line. He's arguing that what's happening now, and specifically he's pointing to the opposition party, the SDSM, he says it goes beyond the normal rough and tumble of political criticism. He used the phrase institutional intimidation.
Institutional intimidation.
Yeah.
Okay, that carries a lot more weight than just mean comments. That sounds systemic.
It does. It implies the machinery of politics is being weaponized. The goal isn't just to counter an argument. It's to silence the platform entirely. It could mean threatening funding, encouraging lawsuits,
creating an environment where advertisers just get scared off.
Exactly. They don't want to be associated with the wrong side.
And this brings up a really interesting nuance in our sources. Usually when we talk about declining freedoms, the story is pretty simple. The government is the bad guy.
Right. The classic authoritarian playbook. The state versus the press. That's the story we're used to.
But here, Endonovsky, who is in the government, is warning about a risk coming from the opposition. He's pointing out that even if his government isn't censoring anyone, a toxic atmosphere created by other parties can still tank the country's reputation.
Precisely. And this is where we have to understand how organizations like Reporters Without Borders RSF actually work. They don't just look at what laws the prime minister signs.
They measure the whole environment.
The whole environment. Media freedom is a metric of democratic health. If that environment is hostile, and it doesn't matter who's throwing the stones, the metric goes down.
It's like hosting a dinner party. You might be perfectly polite, but if your cousin starts flipping tables, the party still gets a bad review.
That is a surprisingly good analogy.
Ah.
And in this case, the review isn't just about social standing. It's the difference between getting into the European Union or not.
Let's drill down on that. We mentioned Chapter 23. For anyone listening who isn't an expert on EU bureaucracy, and I don't blame you, can we demystify that? Why is it so important?
Absolutely. So joining the EU is this long, grueling process where you have to close different chapters of reform. Think of them like levels in a video game.
Okay.
And Chapter 23 covers judiciary and fundamental rights.
Sounds dry, but I'm guessing it's the foundation of everything.
It is the gatekeeper. Before the EU lets you in, you have to prove with data that your courts are independent and your fundamental rights, especially freedom of speech, are protected. If you can't, the door stays shut.
And the EU doesn't just take the government's word for it. They're not just checking a box that says, yep, we're nice to journalists.
No. They rely on external validation. They look at data from NGOs, from international watchdogs, and that is where Reporters Without Borders comes in. Their annual rankings are treated as hard evidence in these EU progress reports.
So connect the dots for us. When Minister Ananovsky says these attacks on, say, Alpha TV are dangerous, he's not just defending an outlet he likes. He's basically shouting, you are messing up our report card.
That's it, exactly. The mechanism is direct. Political pressure, whether it's lawsuits, verbal attacks on journalists, public blacklisting, all of that lowers the country's score.
And if the score drops?
The EU report might label the country partially free or problematic, and then Chapter 23 doesn't close.
Yeah.
And if Chapter 23 doesn't close, EU accession just stalls. It puts the country's entire future on ice.
The irony is just, it's so thick, you have political actors, the opposition in this case, who presumably want the country to join the EU, but by fighting this scorched earth media war, they're potentially sabotaging the very goal they claim to support.
It's a classic tragedy of the commons. By fighting for control of the narrative today, they risk damaging the nation's future standing. It's short-term political gain for long-term strategic loss.
Well, speaking of standing, let's get to the actual data. We have the 2025 Reporters Without Borders Index in front of us. So what is the grade? Did they pass?
The 2025 report is a bit of a mixed bag. It confirms the minister's fears about a decline, but it also gives some context that I think will surprise a lot of people.
Give us the headline number first. Where does Macedonia stand globally?
Okay, globally, out of 180 countries, Macedonia ranks 42nd.
42nd. Okay. Without context, I don't know if that's good or bad. It sounds fine.
Well, it depends on which direction you're looking. If you look at the trend line, it's a decline. In 2024, the country was ranked 36th.
Ouch.
So it has slipped 6 spots in 1 year.
A 6-spot drop isn't just a rounding error. That's a real shift.
No, it shows a real deterioration. But, and here's the nuance, the overall classification for Macedonia is still satisfactory.
Satisfactory. That sounds like my middle school report card. Talks too much in class.
Yeah, it essentially means the situation isn't critical. It's a yellow light, not a red one.
Yeah.
But this is where it gets really interesting. When you look at the neighborhood.
Yes. This is what I was looking at. My jaw actually dropped. We all assume that EU member states are the gold standard, right?
That's the brand, yeah.
Yeah.
The EU is supposed to be a bastion of democracy.
But look at this. Macedonia is at 42. Where is Croatia, an EU member?
Croatia's down at 60th.
Bulgaria?
70th.
Greece.
Greece is way down at 89th.
And Serbia?
96th.
That is genuinely wild. Macedonia is beating Greece, the cradle of democracy, by over 40 spots.
Correct. And all those countries, Croatia, Bulgaria, Greece, Serbia, they are all rated as problematic. They're in the orange zone. Macedonia is one of the only countries in that cluster still holding on to a satisfactory rating.
So despite the internal slide, Macedonia is actually a regional leader in media freedom.
It is, and that's why this moment is so critical. It's an outlier in the Balkans. It has managed to keep a level of press freedom that its neighbors have lost, but that slide from 36 to 42 suggests gravity is starting to take hold.
It's like they're climbing a mountain, they're higher up than their friends, but they just slipped a few feet.
Exactly. And the fear that Minister Ananovsky is talking about is that if they don't correct course, they'll tumble down to where Serbia or Greece are. They risk normalizing the behavior that dragged their neighbors down.
Okay, so let's play doctor. We know the patient is healthier than the neighbors, but they've got a fever. Why the slip? What exactly is RSF measuring that caused that 6-spot drop?
Right. So RSF doesn't just guess the vibe. They measure 5 specific things: political context, legal framework, economic context, sociocultural context, and safety.
Okay, so which one is dragging the score down? Is it safety? Are journalists in physical danger?
Fortunately, no. The safety score is relatively stable. The diagnosis in the report aligns almost perfectly with what we were just talking about. It's the political context. The problem is structural and political.
Structural how?
The biggest key word here, and if you take one thing away, let it be this, is polarization. The report describes a situation where the two largest political parties had created what they call parallel media systems.
Parallel media systems. That is a fascinating and, frankly, terrifying phrase.
It is. It means you don't really have a national conversation anymore. You have two separate bubbles.
Yeah.
One set of media outlets reports reality A, which is favorable to one party,
And the other set reports reality B.
favorable to the other, and they never meet.
That sounds exhausting. As a citizen, you're not choosing which news to watch, you're choosing which reality to live in.
And that's the point. If media outlets are just extensions of political parties, they aren't holding power accountable. They're just PR firms. And that tanks the political context score.
I see the report also mentions transparency issues. That seems to go hand in hand with polarization.
Yes, this is a big one for investigative journalists. Government agencies are criticized for not being transparent enough. If a journalist asks for data and the agency just ghosts them.
That's soft censorship.
It is. You don't have to ban a story if you just hide the facts it's based on.
And the end result of all of this.
Trust issues, widespread disinformation, a perceived lack of professionalism. The public just doesn't trust the media anymore.
Which brings us right back to the vibe we started with. If nobody trusts the media and politicians are using it as a weapon, the whole democracy just feels less free, even if the laws are the same.
That's the core of it. Freedom isn't just the right to speak. It's the ability to be heard and believed. And when the noise is too high, the truth just gets drowned out.
I want to pivot for a second. We have a lot of listeners in the diaspora. Maybe in Toronto, the source mentions the United Macedonians organization there, or in Australia, or the US. Why does any of this matter to them?
It matters immensely. I mean, think about it. If you're sitting in Toronto trying to figure out what's happening in your homeland, you rely entirely on media reports.
Right. You're at the mercy of the digital feed.
But if the country has parallel media systems, how do you even know what's true? This polarization makes information reliability a nightmare for the diaspora. You get a totally different story depending on which website you click.
It's like trying to watch a movie, but half the audience is watching a comedy and the other half is watching a horror film, and they're both describing it to you at the same time.
That's a great way to put it. And beyond just that confusion, there's the reputation side of it. Diaspora organizations work hard to promote the country, to encourage investment, tourism. They're essentially unpaid ambassadors.
And they need the country to look stable to the outside world.
Exactly. Stability is currency. When reports from the EU or RSF come out saying press freedom is declining, it hurts the country's diplomatic standing. It makes it harder to advocate for Macedonia on the world stage. It scares away investors.
So it's not just about what happens in Skopje. It ripples out to every community around the world that cares.
Absolutely. When the brand of the country is damaged by these internal fights, everyone connected to that brand suffers.
This has been a really enlightening look at something that could so easily be dismissed as just politics as usual, but looking at the data, it's clearly not.
No, it's about the fundamental machinery of how a society talks to itself.
So let's bring this all together. We have Macedonia, ranked 42nd in the world.
Which, again, is satisfactory and, frankly, pretty impressive given the neighborhood. They're doing better than many established democracies in the region.
Right, outperforming EU members like Greece and Bulgaria. That's the good news.
But the warning light is flashing. It has slipped 6 spots. And that's the trend that needs to be reversed.
And we have a minister warning that this institutional intimidation, creating these parallel hostile media realities, is threatening to tank that score even further.
And potentially jeopardizing the whole EU accession process. The EU is looking for a healthy democracy, not just a compliant one.
It really feels like the country is at a crossroads.
It is. It can either address this polarization and solidify its status as a democratic leader in the Balkans, or it can let gravity take over.
And just get dragged down into the problematic category with its neighbors.
Exactly. And once you lose that ground, once you lose that trust, it is incredibly difficult to earn it back.
The takeaway here, I think, for everyone listening, whether you care about Macedonia specifically or just the state of democracy in general, is that freedom is fragile. It's not a statue you build once and then just admire.
It's a garden you have to constantly tend to. And sometimes you have to pull out the weeds of intolerance, even when they're coming from your own side of the political aisle.
Which is always the hardest part.
Yeah, that requires a lot of political courage.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We talked about these parallel media systems. If political parties can successfully create their own separate realities where they control the narrative, does the ranking even matter anymore?
That is the scary part.
At what point does that polarization become an even bigger threat to democracy than outright censorship? If we can't even agree on the basic facts of reality, does it matter if we're technically free to speak them?
That is a question we should all be asking no matter where we live. Because once you lose a shared reality, you lose the ability to solve problems together.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We will catch you on the next one.
Goodbye, everyone.